good hour. Genesis chapter 35. Up till now, we had Genesis 1, God's creation of the world. We learned about the gap. We learned about the creation of the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, the grass, the animals, mankind. We learned about mankind turning against God. And we learned about how God promised a seed to Eve. And ever since then, the devil has been trying to corrupt that seed. And he did that with Cain. He tried to get Abel murdered, and he succeeded. Cain killed Abel, and so God gave Adam another boy, Seth, to have a good seed for the Messiah. The devil kept doing awful things to humankind. God told mankind to go and populate the earth, and the devil had mankind all get together and make a tower in Babel, right? And the mankind got so wicked that God destroyed him with a flood. Then finally we get to the man Abram. I was going to say Adam. Abram, who is a man that God chooses to lead his people, to be the father of the Jewish race. And the main three heads of the Jewish race is Grandpa, Dad, and the boy. Grandpa's Abraham, Dad's Isaac, Jacob is the boy. And Jacob becomes the one that God chooses to name his people after, Israel. God changes his name, and we'll see that today. And if you remember in the big picture, God wants his kingdom on this earth. He wants the kingdom of heaven, which is a physical kingdom. He wants that to be ruled by a righteous man. And he will eventually allow Jesus Christ to rule it. But in the Old Testament, he was doing it through Israel. And Jacob was the man at this time that God had given the covenant and the promise to. So Genesis 35, let's learn a little bit more about Jacob. And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. So here's our map. That's great. If you remember, Jacob was down in around Hebron with his dad, Isaac, and he went up north to find his wife, Rachel, and he worked for 20 years there in order to earn Rachel and Leah and the cattle. After 20 years working up somewhere, wherever Laban was, Padanaram, he came back down, and while he was on the way down, he was afraid to meet somebody. Who was that? Esau. I would be afraid too, I'll bet. If you had a brother and the last time you saw him, he was saying, I'm going to kill you, boy. You'd be scared to meet him again too. So while he's on the way down, you remember the story last time that Esau met him and they were at peace. And Jacob, that deceiver, one more time, he told Esau, all right, you go to Mount Seir, which I believe is down here in Edom. You go to Mount Seir and I'll come down there and meet with you. And does he do it? No. He sneaks out of the way and goes somewhere different. He goes to Shechem. And you remember what happens there. Dinah, Jacob's daughter, gets hooked up with a guy from Shechem. And to make a long story short, Jacob's two sons, Simeon and Levi, murder all the men of Shechem because they defiled their sister. So it's not going well for Jacob and his family. They've got a bad reputation. I would have a really bad reputation as an outsider, not from North Carolina, if I showed up in Robbins and everybody in Frogtown got killed by my kids. Y'all probably wouldn't like me. I'd probably have a bad reputation. That's what happened with Jacob. He got a whole city of people murdered. Not good. Not that it was his fault, really, but it was his family, and so people would look to him as being responsible. So Jacob, last time we saw him was in Shechem, and I'm not positive where that is, but God tells him to go up to where? In our verse here? Bethel. Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. If you remember, the first time he went up north towards Padanaram, he stopped in Bethel, laid his head on a rock to sleep, and that's where he had the first vision in his dream. He saw the ladder ascending to heaven, and he saw the sons of God ascending and descending on it, and God talked to him, and that's where God told Jacob, I'm giving you the covenant of your fathers, Abraham and Isaac. I will, if you'll, trying to remember the parts of the covenant. He's saying, I'll give you the land. All this land you look at is yours. I'll make out of you a great nation, and I'll bless you. That's the covenant he gave to Abraham. A land, a seed, and a blessing. And that happened in Bethel. And now while he's on the way back down, God tells him, I want you to go back to Bethel. So that's good to remember. All right. He says, Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob said unto his household, and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. Now, Jacob had allowed his family to have idols up until this point. And here's a lesson for mom, dad. It's a good idea not to let your kids have idols, not to have things in their life that they worship above God. And we all are guilty at some point of slacking off on our duty. I'm a young parent. My kid's not even a year old. I don't have that much experience in parenting. He can't even talk yet. I don't have much. He doesn't know right from wrong yet. I've never spanked the boy because he's done wrong. He doesn't know yet. He's just a baby. There comes a time as a parent where you've got to lay down the law and make sure that your kids are doing right. You've got to protect them from evil things. And Jacob had failed here. He had let his wives have idols, which, Rachel stole those idols from her dad out of Padanaram, and they were worshiping false gods. And Jacob had slacked off in his duty as the leader up till this point. God had proven himself faithful, and God had earned Jacob's devotion, and Jacob was letting his family worship false gods. And this story, the moral of the story right here is, if you have slacked off on your duty, that doesn't mean you should just say, I've led him this far, I might as well let him continue on. No. When you get a wake-up call from the Lord, when the Lord says, hey, I want to meet with you, maybe you hear a sermon that really gets to you, or you hear a Bible verse in your reading that just sticks you in the heart, and you realize, I haven't been doing right. You don't need to just say, all right, well, I'll be fine. I'll just carry on the way I'm going. No, clean it up. Clean up house. If your house is filthy, clean it. If your kids are doing stuff they shouldn't and you know it, put a stop to it. You're in control. It is your responsibility. If your wife is doing something wrong, help her out. Stop making provision for the flesh to fulfill the lusts thereof. As the husband, it is your job to make sure that the house is clean. And I don't just mean physically, I'm talking about spiritually. And when you realize, even in your own heart, if there's stuff you've got going on in your own heart, when it's time to meet with the Lord, if you know you're about to meet with the Lord, you clean up shop before you go and meet with him. Don't get there and let him bust you for all the filth in there. You try to clean up shop before you get to him. You get there. There's a couple bad ways you can think about that. I don't want to make any bad applications here. All I'm saying is, Jacob had been doing wrong, and he realizes, I'm going to meet with the Lord here. Let's clean up the house, and let's be clean when we meet with God, which is a good idea. Verse 4, and they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. There's a strange thing, I don't know what it is, but in the Bible, the oak trees are usually associated with false gods. I'm not saying oak trees are bad. I love a good oak tree. They give great shade and they draw in the deer. I like an oak. It's good, strong wood. But in the Bible, for whatever reason, oak trees are usually associated with devil worship. And if there's a grove in the Bible, it's usually an oak grove, a grove of oak trees where they worship Baal. That's just something to notice because it says it a few times throughout the Bible. I'm not sure why an oak tree, but it's in there. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them. And they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. Does anybody in here have any idea why every city around them was terrified of them? They had just massacred a whole city of people. If you heard that Billy the Kid had come through town and massacred an entire city, you probably wouldn't go out and try to pick a fight with Billy. You'd stay away from the guy who has a reputation for killing a whole city. So Jacob came to Luz, and if you remember, that is Bethel. Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel, he and all the people that were with him, and he built there an altar and called the place El Bethel, because there God appeared unto him when he fled from the face of his brother. But Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak, and the name of it was called Allon Bacuth. There's some verses in the Bible, and I have no idea why they're in there or what they have to say to you and me. That's one of them. If anybody finds out what in the world Deborah has to do with anything, you let me know. I don't know what she's there for, but she got buried in an oak in Bethel. Not sure why. Verse 9, and God appeared unto Jacob again when he came out of Padanaram and blessed him. And God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Pay attention to these next 4 words. Be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. You've heard that before, haven't you? In Genesis chapter 1, he tells Adam in verse 22, Genesis 1:22, he says, Genesis 1:28, and God blessed them, and God said unto them, the man and the woman, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. God said that to Adam. Adam was the king of the kingdom of heaven. He was the king of God's physical kingdom on this earth. You say, how do you know? Because God gave him dominion, and he told him, be fruitful and multiply. That was a part of his covenant. If you look at Genesis 9, verse 1, that's talking about Noah after he gets off the ark, starting the world over with 8 people. Genesis 9:1, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. And he gives them dominion. He lets them eat meat. And then in our passage here in Genesis 35, verse 11, he tells, for the 3rd time, he tells a man, be fruitful and multiply. And this time it's Jacob. So that lets you know God is connecting Jacob with Adam, and he's connecting Jacob with Noah, showing the world that Jacob is my king over my people. He's the king of my kingdom on the earth. The nation of Israel in the Old Testament was the kingdom of heaven, and God was giving that dominion to Jacob and told him, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it. And to thy seed after thee will I give the land. And God went up from him in the place where he talked with him. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even a pillar of stone. And he poured a drink offering thereon, and poured oil thereon. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spake with him, Bethel. And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath. Now, Ephrath, that should go ding, 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 ding. That sounds familiar. Ephrath. And Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said unto her, fear not, thou shalt have this son also. So up to this point, Rachel has only had one boy. What was his name? Joseph. She's about to have her 2nd boy. She's having a really hard time. And her midwife comforts her and says, you'll have this boy also. Verse 18, and it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died giving birth to Benjamin. It's a sad story. Rachel was the one that Jacob loved. That was his wife. That was the love of his life, the woman he wanted to be with. And she passed away giving birth to his 2nd boy. Notice the wording there in verse 18. It says, as it came to pass, and it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died. The Bible defines death as the moment a soul departs from a body. Say this is your body. Got really short arms. One really short arm. You have a soul inside of your body. Did you know that? We should all know that. Your soul is who you are. And the moment you die in this flesh is when your soul, which is inside you, departs from your body. Do you know what your soul looks like? Looks an awful lot like you look like right now. It has eyes, it has a nose, it has a tongue. Your soul is a visible thing. When the rich man wakes up in hell in Luke 16, his body is in the dirt, in the ground. Well, let me turn over there and show you what it says about him, his soul. This is in Luke 16. When the woman with a familiar spirit summoned up Samuel in front of Saul, Samuel's body was rotting in a grave somewhere, and Saul saw Samuel. That was his soul, which has a physical form. You have a soul which looks an awful lot like you. In Luke 16, it says, it came to pass, and the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. So where was his body? Buried in the dirt, 6 feet under. And in hell, he lift up his eyes. Was his physical body in hell? His physical body was up in the dirt. He was in hell. Who he was, his soul was in hell. And his soul had what? Eyes. He lift up his eyes, being in torments. If you burn in hell, it is your soul burning. Ouch. He lift up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue. He had eyes, he had a tongue. I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime hast receivest thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. And he goes on, and you know the story. So that rich man down there had a body. A soul has a body. In the book of Revelation, it says he saw the souls of them which were martyred under the altar. When you die, your soul leaves your body, and your body falls over completely dead, and doctors say he's brain dead, he's electronegative, he's got no more life in him. What really happened is God took your soul and separated that thing from that body. And this verse right here that we're looking at in Genesis 35:18 says, as her soul was in departing, for she died. That tells you when somebody dies, it's when their soul leaves their body. It's not when a doctor says they're dead. As we learned with, what was his name? Brother Marlowe. They declared him dead, right?
Yes, sir.
Doctor said, this man's dead. And God said, no, he isn't. And, doctors made a mistake. That's fine. They do that all the time. But you're not dead when a doctor says so. You're dead when God says it's time for that soul to leave that body. And when God says your soul is going to leave your body, there's nothing you or any doctor can do to stop it. So you can trust in that you're not going to die until the Lord says so. And she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died and was buried in the way to Ephrath. That's the second time he's used this word, Ephrath. And I said, you ought to know that word. Ephrath is just another word for what city? Bethlehem. That's right. Ephrath is Bethlehem. Bethlehem is a familiar city, right? Does anybody know anything about the city of Bethlehem? Jesus Christ was born in Bethlehem. That's right. A couple other things happened in Bethlehem. In Micah 5:2, it's probably the most famous prophecy about Jesus in the minor prophets there. It says, but thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, I don't want to misquote it, so I'm turning there. Micah 5:2. It says, but thou, Bethlehem Ephratah. And he adds an A right here, so instead of Ephrath, it's spelled like Ephratah. But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from old, even from of old from everlasting. So when Caesar, who's the governor in Judah? Is it Caesar? It's not Caesar. What's the name of the guy who puts the kids to death in Luke 2? Herod. When Herod asks the scribes, hey, where is the king of the Jews supposed to be born? They all had the answer. They said, in Bethlehem. They took him to Micah 5:2 and said, out of Bethlehem Ephratah. So Ephrath, that we're seeing for the first time here, is a very important city. And that is right outside of the city of Ephrath, or the city of Bethlehem, is where Jacob's wife Rachel dies. And it's where Benjamin is born. Verse 20, and Jacob set a pillar upon her grave. That is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. And Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the tower of Edar. And it came to pass, when Israel dwelt in the land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard it. That's all he has to say. I mean, holy moly. Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now, out of the children of Israel, these four were born first. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Those were the first four boys. So who's the firstborn of Jacob? Reuben. Reuben sleeps with his dad's wife. You think he's going to get the birthright from his father and the blessing? Nope, that pretty well crosses Reuben off the list. Simeon and Levi just got done massacring a city of mostly innocent people. You think they're going to make the list of dad's favorite who's going to get the blessing? No. So cross him off, cross him off. That answers the question, why in the world does the fourth boy in the list get to have the Messiah come out of his seed? Well, Reuben messed up big time. Simeon messed up big time. Levi messed up big time. God had mercy on Levi and allowed his kids to be the priests. But Judah gets to have the Messiah. The first three boys really messed up. And who do you think was behind that? Trying to mess up the seed one more time. The devil's in the business of trying to mess up the Messiah's seed. Now, the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon and Levi and Judah and Issachar and Zebulun. And the sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. And the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan and Naphtali. And the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob, which were born to him in Padanaram. And Jacob came unto Isaac his father, unto Mamre, unto the city of Arba, which is in Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. So he was up in Bethel, and now he's gone back down to Hebron, where his dad lives, or his dad lived. And the days of Isaac were 180 years. How many is that? 180. A score is 20. So 100 plus 80, that's 80. 180. And Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered up unto his people, being old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So Isaac is dead. Abraham's died. Isaac has died. Jacob is the last of the patriarchs. And if you look at chapter 36, we're not going to read through every verse of 36 because it's going to give Edom's or Esau's descendants, but we do want to look at a couple of highlights from 36. And one more thing before I move on to that. In Genesis 35, we saw that city Ephrath. Two important things happened in Ephrath, or in Bethlehem. What were they? Somebody died and somebody was born. Who died?
Rachel died.
Rachel died. Who was born? Benjamin was born. A couple other important things happened. Obviously, we all know that Jesus is born in Bethlehem, which is not his hometown. The Lord worked it out to get him there because that's where Joseph had to go to pay his taxes. But Benjamin was born there. Rachel died there. There's a love story later on where a woman who's a Midianite comes back home with Naomi and gets married to Boaz. Guess what city that happens in? Bethlehem. There's a little boy, the son of Elkanah, who his mom prays and prays and prays, and she finally gets pregnant, and then she gives her boy to the priest, Eli. What's that boy's name? Samuel. Guess what city he's born in? Bethlehem. There's a man named Jesse who has a little boy. He's got 7 really good sons, and the youngest one takes care of sheep out in the field. What's his name? David. Guess what city he's born in? It's a special city in the Bible. And then obviously Jesus Christ is born in Bethlehem, which later gets named the city of David. So when you see the city of David or you see Ephrath, it's talking about Bethlehem. That's chapter 35. Chapter 36. Now, these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom. Esau, which is whose brother?
Jacob.
Good. Esau is Jacob's brother. Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan. Is that good or bad? Bad. It was very obvious. Abraham wanted Isaac to not marry a Canaanite. Isaac wanted Jacob, don't marry a Canaanite. And we saw in the chapters before that Esau's Canaanite wives were a grief of mind unto Isaac and Rebekah. So Esau took these wives of Canaan, Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Aholibamah. I love the Bible names. Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite, Bashemath, Ishmael's daughter. So we have 3 wives, which is a bad thing. 2 are Canaanites, 1's an Ishmaelite. All people who are against God. And look on down in verse 6. And Esau took his wives and his sons and his daughters and all the persons of his house and his cattle and all his beasts and all his substance which he had got in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob. That tells you something right there. They weren't getting along still. He went away from his brother's face. I can't even stand to look at his face anymore. I'm going into the country. For their riches were more than that they might dwell together, and the land wherein they were strangers could not bear them because of their cattle. Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. And these are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in Mount Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Adah, the wife of Esau; Reuel, the son of Bashemath, the wife of Esau. Whose kids are we talking about here? Esau's kids, right? Yeah. This is Esau's family in Genesis 36. Look at verse 12. And Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bare to Eliphaz, who? Amalek. Does that ring a bell? In the book of Exodus, when the Jews are leaving Egypt and they cross the Red Sea and they are marching up towards the Promised Land, there's a race of people who tries to kill them. The first people they meet, the first people they have to fight in a war. You remember the story where Moses is sitting up and he's got to keep his hands up in order for the Jews to win the battle? And his arms get tired, and Aaron and his good buddies, hold his arms up for him so they can win the battle. Joshua's down there leading the army. Guess who they're fighting? The Amalekites. That's their cousins. That is Edomites, Esau's descendants. So in all those other verses that we saw where God is very angry with Edom, he's very angry with Esau, here's the first reason why. One of the first reasons why. Because Amalek, the cousin, long distance, but the cousin, they were supposed to be brothers, Jacob and Esau, but Esau's grandson Amalek bears the race of people who are the first ones to try to kill the Jews when they're coming into the land of Canaan. And God punishes the Edomites because of that. We won't look at all the rest of the verses here in chapter 36. I do want you to notice something. Look at verse 15. It says, These were dukes of the sons of Esau. The sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau, Duke Teman, Duke Omar, Duke Zepho, Duke Kenaz, Duke. I don't know exactly why, but these guys are all called dukes. That's a title of, nobility, I guess. And Jacob's sons are called princes. Esau's sons are called dukes, and a duke comes below a prince. So God is obviously favoring Jacob and his children. Okay, and we'll skip over the rest of those verses. You can read those on your own, but we'll look over at chapter 37, Genesis 37. And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. Now, Jacob's father is dead, right? Mm-hmm. Who else is dead? His grandpa, Abraham. Somebody he loved very much just died in Ephrath. Who was that? Rachel, his wife. Rebecca, his mom, has been dead for a while, I think. Has she died yet? Have we seen Rebecca die? Looking real quick. I don't see where Rebecca dies. Her nurse Deborah dies. I don't know what that's about. It doesn't exactly say when Rebecca dies. In chapter 49, it says she was buried with close to Isaac there. So he's lost his dad at least, and he's lost his wife, at least the one he loves. And now he's dwelling in the land where his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. He's been through some hardship, he's been through some trials, and now God is going to prove him in this land to see if he's going to be faithful to him. Verse 2, These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, Rachel's firstborn, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Notice, up until now, they've been called his concubines, right? Bilhah and Zilpah have been not his wife, but Bilhah and Zilpah have been called, Jacob's, the handmaid of Rachel, or the handmaid of Leah. And now God says, Bilhah and Zilpah, Jacob's wives, which means that God, when you have children with a woman, God considers that woman your wife, not just some servant. That is marriage. And when Reuben gets together with Bilhah, that is him getting together with his father's wife. And that happens there in the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, God says that I've heard that one of you is sleeping with his father's wife. And that's something that's not even named among the Gentiles. That's something wicked heathens don't even do. So this wickedness has been around a long time. And obviously it's going on here in Jacob's family, and he's not just this perfect, wonderful, righteous, spotless guy. You know, the family's got trouble. There's problems going on, and, you know, anybody in here not have any family trouble your whole life? You know, we have... You've been alone in a cave your whole life? That's how life goes. And God doesn't just deal with people who are perfect. There's nobody perfect, obviously. God deals with you where you are. And God blessed Jacob, even though there were problems in his life. In the long run, Jacob proved faithful to the Lord. At the end of verse 2, it says, "And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report." Their evil report. So Joseph was kind of a snitch. He was with Bilhah and Zilpah's kids. So he was with Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher feeding the flock. And apparently those boys did something evil, and Joseph would go back and tell Jacob those guys were doing something evil, bringing the evil report to his dad. Which, you know, that brings you favor with your dad, but it makes your brothers not like you. Snitches get stitches, right? That's the old saying. And his brothers did not like him. Verse 3, "Now Israel," that's Jacob, "Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren. And they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. We were wrapping corn up, and mine stood up straight, and you guys' bowed over to mine, or hay, or whatever it was. You think that would make you happy if your little brother said, I had a dream, and all you guys bowed down to me? Don't you guys think that's cool? No, Jacob. Go snitch on somebody else. Get out here. No, Joseph, get out of here. We don't like you. And his brethren said unto him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. The sun and the moon and the how many stars? 11 stars made obeisance to me. That's Genesis 37, 9 through 11. He says the sun and the what? The banana. And the, I'm not going to do a perfect star for everyone, but it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stars made obeisance to me. So how many stars were there total? 11 plus 1? 12 stars, sun and moon. The sun and moon probably representing Jacob there, I would imagine. But the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. That's just a dream. And in this story, that's just kind of, okay, it's just another dream. There's a cross-reference to this that is very important that you can use against Roman Catholics. That is very, very, very important. Look at Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. Revelation 12. Before I ever really studied the Bible on my own, I had a barber that I've told you about probably a dozen times who was Roman Catholic. And he asked me a question. I was probably 17 years old. I hadn't done much Bible study at all. But he asked me, Daniel, what do you think about that woman in Revelation 12? Who is that talking about? So I went and looked. Revelation 12, verse 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Does that ring a bell? Sun, moon, 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. And he says to me, my Catholic barber, well, obviously this blessed woman is the Virgin Mary, is what this Catholic says to me. And that's something that the Catholic Church teaches, that this woman in this passage is the Virgin Mary. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So they teach when Joseph and Mary ran down into Egypt, that was the fulfillment of this verse, that the woman, Mary, was fleeing down into the wilderness for 1,260 days. The problem is, in verse 5, Jesus gets caught up into heaven, which tells you this woman is not Mary. This woman is somebody else. So who is it? Take a look at the big picture. The sun, the moon, and the 12 stars. That's, mom, dad, and 12 babies. Who is that talking about? You've got Jacob, you've got Rachel, and you've got the 12 tribes of Israel. Who are we talking about? Israel, the nation. We're talking about the nation of Israel. This woman in Revelation 12 is so clearly the nation of Israel, and this is probably one of the best cross references to show you. When you see sun, moon, 12 stars, you're talking about a picture of the Jews, not Mary. Mary was just a Jew, a good Jew, a faithful Jew, a good woman. But the Catholics use verses like this to put her up on a pedestal where she doesn't belong. She was just an ordinary saint like you and me. Blessed, highly favored, but not to be worshipped. And when she gives this child, that's why the Catholics really want her to be Mary, because, the nation Israel wasn't pregnant. There's so many prophecies about the nation of Israel travailing and being, having birth pangs and being ready to give birth. And that Revelation 12 is an overview of Jesus' birth, his ascension into heaven, and then it skips the church age and it's into the tribulation. Okay, back to Genesis 37. That's an important cross-reference. I thought it was very important for you to see. If you write cross-references in your Bible, that's a good one. If a Catholic ever does ask you, well, who do you think that woman in Revelation 12 is? You can take them back to Genesis 37, 9 through 11, and show them Israel, the nation of Israel, the 12 tribes, Jacob and his wife. Verse 10. And he told it to his father and his brethren, and his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother, sun and moon, shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come and bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. You all know the story of Joseph. His brethren sell him for the price of a slave, right? Did you know that just 45 minutes ago we talked about a man who was sold for the price of slave because of envy? Joseph has so many similarities with Jesus Christ. Incredibly. He also has an incredible amount of similarities with the Antichrist, which we'll look at probably next week. And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. He kept that in his mind. This also happened with Mary. When all those things happened when Jesus was 12, Joseph probably walked away angry about Jesus staying in the temple in Jerusalem. You remember the story? We just talked about it in VBS. But, Jesus gets left behind in the temple, and when Joseph and Mary spend 3 days trying to find him, they finally find him in the temple, asking these questions and giving these answers to the doctors, blowing these adults' minds. And, Joseph probably is angry leaving, and it says Mary kept these sayings in her heart. She remembered, there's something special about this boy. She knew from Gabriel that something was special about Christ, but she kept those sayings in her heart. This happened to Joseph right here, same thing. His father observed the saying. He kept that in his mind. I picked the right boy to be my favorite, I guess. Verse 12. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in where? Shechem. Hey, does that ring a bell? Simeon and Levi killed everybody in Shechem. And they want to go back to the place where they had murdered all the men and feed some sheep there. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, Here am I. Jacob's thinking, it didn't go so well the last time they were over there. I wonder if they're up to no good. I wonder if they're up to murdering people. Can you go check on those boys? See if they're doing all right? And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he, that's Joseph, said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed hence. For I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. Dothan, however you want to pronounce it. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Is there a chipmunk over there? Well, at least it's not velvet. That's good. So they were supposed to be in Shechem. These 11 brothers were supposed to be feeding Jacob's flocks in Shechem, and instead of being where they were supposed to be, or where they said they'd be, they sneaked off over to Dothan. And it must have been common for Joseph to show up and give a report to his father. And I'm sure they were thinking, well, let's just get out of Shechem and Joseph won't be able to find us. You know how brothers are. If you have any brothers, that's how brothers are. Well, let's get out of here and hopefully Daniel won't be able to find where we are. Because little brothers come looking when you're somewhere else. Little brothers definitely want to be around their big brothers and see what's going on. And Joseph wanted to give a report to his father. So they left Shechem and went over to Dothan, and when they see Joseph coming, first thought in their mind, how can we get away from this stupid kid? I hate this guy. And they hate him so much that they conspire to kill him. Terrible. Verse 19, and they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. We won't bow down to him if he's dead in a pit somewhere. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. The older brother steps in with at least a little common sense. Let's not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. So Reuben's idea was, let's just throw him in the pit and let him die there. And when they walked away, he was going to go save Joseph out of the pit and bring him back to dad. Reuben had a good big brother moment for just a second, and it probably wasn't even out of a good heart. He was probably thinking, I'll earn my dad's favor then maybe I'll be the favorite. So Reuben's doing, a little better than everybody else. Verse 23, and it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him, his special gift from his dad. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites, that's their cousins, came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother in our flesh. And his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. Jesus got sold for how many pieces of silver? 30 pieces of silver. That's inflation. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. And he rent his clothes. His whole plan was, I'll get him put in a pit, and then I'll save him. When he gets back to the pit, his brother's been sold, and he's not there. And he was angry. He was upset. He rent his clothes. Verse 30, and he returned unto his brethren and said, The child is not, and whither shall I go? He's the oldest brother. He's probably going to be the one to answer for his dad for where Joseph is. He's going to be the responsible one. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, This we have found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. You see that? You see how stepkids can be mean? They were half brothers with Joseph, right? Only half blood. They didn't call him, is this our brother's? Dad, this is our brother's coat, and it's got blood on it. What do you think? No. See, is this your son's? Families can get tense, right? If there's hatred and bitterness in a family, if there's a family feud, it can get rough. To the point where you go up talking about your brother and you say, is this your son's coat? There was a time, I'm not proud of it, but there was a time, it was bad, it was wrong, but I shouldn't tell that story, never mind. You ought to respect and love your parents and your brother the best you can. Verse 33, and he knew it. So he knew that was his boy's coat and said, "It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces." And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. So poor Jacob has lost his wife, his dad, maybe his mom, and definitely the firstborn son of his favorite wife. Everybody he really loves, the closest people to him, are all dying one by one. And he is just, imagine the gray hairs that would put on your head, the stress and the pain, the mourning, the crying. He's in a strange land. The only family he has around are the ones he's married or given birth to. He's alone, and all the closest to him are dying. And he's probably wondering at this point, "Lord, I said I'd worship you if you prospered me." He's going through a lot. An awful lot. And we'll see later on in the story, is Jacob going to stay faithful to the Lord or not? And Joseph, he got sold to Potiphar. Where? What country? Egypt. We'll get into that in Genesis 39. But for now, that's the end of our Genesis class. Any questions at all about anything we covered tonight?